everybody. Thank you. So today we're going to take a bit of a break from the sermon series that we've been in to really start to enter into and engage with the Easter story. So we've talked about it already, today being Palm Sunday. If you have a Bible with you or the app on your phone you want to follow along, you might want to go to John 11:55. But really what my heart for today is that today could be a moment of preparation for us. So that's been my prayer to God today, is that we would have open hearts and softened hearts, and that as part of today we could start to prepare our hearts for this week, for Good Friday, for the celebration that comes on Easter Sunday. So I hope that's what we're able to do today. This passage in Palm Sunday is probably one that's quite familiar to many. What I feel really as I was preparing this is I think God wants to speak to us through this idea of misplaced faith and broken expectations. And you can read Palm Sunday in fact, all the Gospels. Today we're really going to concentrate on John, but I've put them all up there because I'd really encourage you this week to read them all, to get stuck in yourself, see what God's speaking to you about in this moment. But we're going to crack on with John, and I'm actually going to take it back from the beginning there at John 11:55. Okay. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so they could arrest him. So that's the context of this story. There's literally an arrest warrant out for Jesus. Let's jump back in. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was amongst those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, which is an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of Jesus' disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected, "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages." Now, he didn't really say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You'll always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. The next day, so this is building to this moment, the next day, the great crowd had come for the festival, heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. They took palm branches and went out to meet him, shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel." Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as it is written, "Do not be afraid, daughter Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt." At first, his disciples didn't understand all of this. It was only after Jesus was glorified did they realize that these things had been written about him and that these things had been done to him. Now the crowd that was with him when he called Lazarus from the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to spread the word. Many people, because they had heard he had performed this sign, went out to meet him. So the Pharisees said to one another, "See, this is getting us nowhere. Look how the whole world had gone after him." And we'll end it there. So I know I read quite a lot there, but I wanted really just to get the context and the flow of what's coming up. Palm Sunday was a revealing moment where what was underneath was being exposed. We have exposing moments, right? We have them in society. We definitely have them in this country, where it feels like everything's okay, but it's really just bubbling under the surface, and something comes along and you get this reaction. We get this in our individual life as well. There's moments or things that come along that provoke a reaction within us. And actually what that's doing is exposing what is underneath. Don't know if you've ever done that work some people do about trying to work out what your values are. And sometimes it's hard to identify them, but one of the best questions is to ask yourself, when's the last time I got annoyed, frustrated, angry, upset? Because usually it's because something or someone has overstepped one of your values. So I'm going to do an exercise with you. It's just by yourself, and you don't have to share it with anybody. But I want you to think about the last time you reacted. Now, this could be really small, really trivial. It does not need to be a big thing. Okay, so last time you reacted. And then I want you to take a moment and think, why did I react? What value was being overstepped? Good or bad? I'll just give you a minute. Can be an interesting exercise to do, can't it? I don't know if you're used to doing that or not. I'll give an example, really straightforward, quite a trivial one. But anyways, I got an email through my account, checked it on my phone. It was, on the face of it, quite a simple email. It was an email from my kids' school telling them that there was a study hall which was open on the Saturday and the exams are coming up and encourage my children to attend. On the face of it seemed quite simple. But I noticed inside me that I was quite frustrated, and don't know if anybody else does this, but in a very passive-aggressive way, quickly swipe it delete. Does anybody do that? So, and probably because I was preparing this, I started to think, oh, that's interesting. Why did that bother me? What was the value it was crossing? If I'm honest, part of it is probably just my stubbornness of somebody else telling me how to parent my kids. That's being honest. But what else? I think there's more than that. I could see and can see how the pressure of exams affects my kids. I can see how they're trying and giving their best, but actually pressure and stress just impacts concentration negatively. I can see the bigger picture. And hear me writing this, I do have a value on people performing to their best academically, but I hold much deeper values on where my kids' value lies. On the value of their joy, the value of their peace, the value I hold as their mum, as their protector. Don't rile the mama bear. There are situations that come along in our lives and they provoke a reaction. And rather than just getting annoyed at ourselves for having a reaction, how can we use these moments as a moment of growth? These moments allow us to assess what are our underlying values, positive and negative. But it gives us a moment to look at these values and see, do these hold true? Or do they need to be reshaped and rebuilt? That is what I see happening in Palm Sunday. What you don't see happening in Palm Sunday is indifference, but you do see differing reactions. You know, in Matthew's Gospel, it has this line, the entire city of Jerusalem was in uproar as he entered. There was no indifference here. You needed a reaction. We see people celebrating, crowds stopping, gathering, calling out praise and worship. In Luke 19, it says, if the people are quiet, even the rocks would cry out. At the same time, we have the Pharisees, which we know from Luke's account were calling out to Jesus, telling him to rebuke the people. And we also read earlier how there was an arrest warrant on him. That was their reaction. Even Jesus had mixed reactions. Whilst this was a moment of celebration and praise and him coming in as a king, in Luke's account it tells us that as he came into Jerusalem, he began to weep. And he said, how I wish today that you of all people would understand the way to peace. This was a revealing moment. Their and our reactions expose our underlying foundations, values, and beliefs. I want to take a moment now really to hone in now on the Pharisees' reaction. In particular, what it reveals about their foundations, specifically around their foundation of faith. So it's quite easy for us sitting here in 2025 to demonize the Pharisees, to think that wouldn't be us. But I can really see how they got there. They weren't, on the whole, people who woke up, wanted to be evil, cunning, and go and kill the Son of God. These were people who had dedicated their life to following the scriptures and trying to please God. They weren't, by their society standards, criminals. They were people who had worked for many years. They'd studied hard. They sacrificed hard, all to get closer to God. They spent much time praying, studying the scriptures, yearning for the Savior to come, talked about what this might look like. They were people not consciously wanting to do evil. So how did they become so blinded? How did they become so angry? How did they start to develop practices which veered them off what God intended? How did they miss it? I believe Palm Sunday was exposing. It revealed what their underlying values were, and specifically what their faith had become built on. This moment, when Jesus entered Jerusalem on a donkey, was really significant. It was basically him announcing his kingship, him as a king. And whilst we may not get all the references, back then they did. Back then, for a king's coronation, the king would enter the city on a horse, symbolic of their military prowess, and the crowds would welcome the king by waving palm leaves and laying them on the ground. Palm leaves were seen as a sign of victory and triumph. You can go back to Leviticus and Nehemiah for that. I'm not really sure what our equivalent here now is. Sometimes when we line up for a winning sports team to come back or line up and get selfies, I don't know. But this is what they did then with palm leaves. And so you can see that if Jesus wasn't the Son of God, then this was the most offensive demonstration about. So how did they miss it? I believe it's because the foundation of their faith had become misplaced. Rather than placing their faith solely on the person of God, intertwined into that had also become their own systems and structures. Now, whether it started that way or whether that developed over time, we don't know. But if their foundation of their faith was solely on the person of God, they would have recognized Jesus. It wouldn't have threatened them when he came. So if it wasn't built solely on the person of God, what was it built on? What other values and beliefs have become intertwined in their foundation? Perhaps it was on their own intellect, their understanding of the scriptures and what it foretold. Perhaps it was based on their circle, on what was felt or understood within that group of people they were in. Don't know if anybody else likes watching Traitors, how we love it as a family, but you only have to watch one episode of The Round Table to see the power of groupthink, right? Perhaps it was on their performance, their abilities and achievements, how well they had followed the rules and sacrifices of the law, and this message of grace challenged this foundation of earned favour, which they had built everything on. It had become intertwined in their foundation. Once the foundation of our faith is built on something or someone other than the person of God, it is unable to hold up when life and circumstance threatens it. So, what about you and I? Are there areas in our life which have started to integrate themselves into the foundation of our faith other than the person of God? It's not, I think it's subtle. It's not necessarily that God's not part of the foundation. But are there places where it's been God and rather than God full stop? Has it become God and your own understanding? Perhaps God and expectations of others? Or God and your performance and achievements, even if they are ministry achievements or what you feel you're doing for God? Where or who is the foundation of your faith built on? Is it solely in the person of God? Or where, if anything, has become intertwined into this? Another way that I think we can do God and I see this in this story of Palm Sunday, is with regards to our expectations. I'm sure you've heard it said before, the Jews were expecting a military king, one to save them, set the world right in the way they expected. And so Jesus entering on a donkey rather than coming in on a horse with chariots, it wasn't what they were hoping on, waiting for, or expecting. Even though in this moment Jesus was literally fulfilling prophecies that had been foretold in Zechariah by coming in on a donkey, they missed it. Even those who were praising and worshipping God, I don't even think they saw the full picture or were expecting him to become crucified later that week. Sometimes we need our expectations to be broken. That's painful. There's a verse that I love. It's meant a lot to me in my life in Isaiah 55, verse 8 to 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Let's go back to the passage I read at John, if you kind of remember that, the bit that came after the arrest warrant before Palm Sunday. Remember we read about the jar of perfume being broke, and the reaction was one from the disciples was more one of judgment, that it could have been sold for money and given to the poor. It's really easy with hindsight to look at that and say that was a bit foolish. But to be honest, it's quite a fair, rational point the disciple made. I think a similar situation here, one of us could make a similar thought. How could they have known everything that was happening? And this is key, because I think rather than assuming they or we should know, where I think is a healthier place for us to move to is acknowledging we don't always know. That his ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are higher than ours. He sees what we only see in part. We get it wrong because we're only working with part of the information. But the danger comes when we fill the gap. What do I mean by that? Whenever God gives you a promise and we fill the gap of what that looks like and create this expectation of what God should do. And we lie to ourselves and think, well, that's what God's told me or that's what God's promised. But actually, where have we filled the gap from what God actually promised to what our expectation now looks like? We can cause ourselves to doing God and we're in danger of creating a false expectation that's not actually offer from God. So how does this happen and why does this happen? Firstly, our perspective and therefore our expectations are influenced by surrounding information, experience, and its relation to facts or experience. So you might have seen this before, but it doesn't translate very well in the slide, but we're going to give it a go. Oh, sorry, skip on. Okay, so you may or may not see it there, but can you see an A? It's like if you look at the top and you look just to the right, that dark square has an A on it. Can you see the B? It's just a wee bit below the base. Okay. And again, you might have seen this before. But does it look like one's darker than the other? Yeah. So which looks darker, A or B? A. Now, you'll be glad I spent a lot of time in PowerPoint putting lots of black boxes out to black out everything else except those two. How do they look now? Look the same, right? Go back. So what's different there? The difference is our mind is taking in the context. It's taking in everything else it sees and its relation to those objects of recognizing there should be a black and white pattern, recognizing there's a shadow there, so that should be darker. We're picking up these signals, which our mind is then giving us a different answer to because of everything that's around. Back to what I said, our perspective and therefore our expectations are influenced by surrounding information, experience, and the relation to each other. So that's one reason why we get it wrong. We don't actually see as black and white as we think we do. Secondly, we have blind spots. We don't always have all the information. We don't always see the full picture. I don't know if anybody watches the program Michael McIntyre's game show, or Big Night, can't remember the name of it now, but he does his one feature in it where he does midnight game show, where if you haven't seen it, he basically goes to a celebrity's house, usually around about midnight or in the middle of the night, comes in with TV crew, they play wacky games, wake the person out of their sleep. It's all a bit of a surprise. So we have my youngest child, Micah, is the games man in our house. So Micah came and he said, Mum, I want to do midnight game show on Dad. And I was like, okay, great idea, let's do it. The kids were in on it as well. So everybody knew this except Ben. The only caveat as a parent, you always become the boring parent and bring in some seriousness. So my seriousness was, we're not doing it midnight. So I said, we can do it half an hour after Dad's gone to sleep. So we kind of settled on that. That was our compromise. But that night, trying to get Ben to go to bed and go to sleep. So we were having a family night, and then Ben was like, oh, let's play another round. And we were like, and then the kids one by one were like, oh, Dad, I'm tired. I think we need to go to bed. And we were all talking and trying to get ourselves slowly to bed. Eventually got Ben to bed. Even then he wanted to sit up and read. And I was like, oh, I'm really tired. Can we just put the light out, please, just tonight? So anyway, after a lot of effort, we eventually got Ben to sleep. Half an hour later, it was amazing. Kids burst in. Micah was in a waistcoat, top hat, made a microphone, everything, played wacky games. And the most fun thing was literally at the end of the last game, they all ran out and turned the light off again, just like the TV show. I will say, I won't go into it all, or I'll go down a rabbit hole here, but you might notice the game send to all. So you'll be glad, anybody here who Ben's number's in your phone, that I didn't let him do that either. But instead, we changed it from send to all your brothers. So you can talk to Johnny over coffee about what he got sent on the response, because that's worth a chat. Anyway, but what I'm trying to say is, that night, trying to get Ben to go to bed, he didn't have all the information, right? He was thinking, let's actually play a good fun family game a bit longer. We don't need to go to bed yet. He didn't have all the information. We have blind spots, like quite literally in the body. We have a blind spot. At the back of the eye, there's a section, there's no light receptors. You actually can't see with it. But we don't walk about every day with these black spots in our vision. Our mind fills the gap. Our perspective, and therefore our understanding, is incomplete. Rather than relying on our own understanding, we can move to appreciate that his ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are higher than ours. So can we do that? Can we hand over our expectations to Jesus? To be honest enough to recognize, where have we shaped these? With our human will, our desire, our experience, or just not having the full picture? Can we let our human plans be broken and instead build our foundation on the person of God and the person of Jesus? I think for Palm Sunday, this is a moment for us to, however we've come today, it's a moment of preparation. It's a moment to honestly say, Jesus, search me and know me. It's a moment to see what else is stuck in that I didn't even notice starting to become entwined in my life and the foundations. Where have I been expecting something and it's maybe not fair? It's not actually what you promised, God. And we might not have noticed it because it started with his promise, but where have we started to shape that and create around that? Is there somewhere in your life where God gave you a promise and in the waiting, you have started to fill in the gap? Is there anywhere that your experience has shaped the expectation of how God's going to work this out? Where do we need to trust that his ways are higher? that we don't always see the full picture, but God does. God does. And the invitation is to trust him. I know for today I've mainly been discussing these concepts of misplaced faith and broken expectations. But as we end, what I love about this passage is that it's really about Jesus coming for his people. Not just then, but also today. Like Jesus came to Jerusalem on the donkey for his people. He has come here to meet you today. Wherever you are, however your week, month, life has been, however shaky right now you feel your faith is, or the foundation of it, wherever it shakes under the challenge, your King has come to meet you here today. I'm thinking back on that prayer that Jesus said as he entered Jerusalem. How I wish that you of all people would understand the way to peace. Jesus is the Prince of Peace, and he is here for you today. So if Jane's here, I might just invite you back up. And what I'm going to do in a second is just put a few questions up, response questions in the slide as Jane plays. And I want to invite you to spend some time with Jesus, to invite him in, to invite him to be the foundation of your faith, to reveal maybe where it has got shaky or ingrained with our experiences, disappointment, hurt, perspectives, beliefs, and rebuild where necessary to create this strong foundation in him. To break expectations and heal the disappointment that may follow. To acknowledge that his ways are higher and build our foundation on him. So I'm just going to pray and then we'll leave some time. And you can do these questions in your head. You can write them on a piece of paper or a notes app in your phone, but just as a moment of response. So Father, I thank you so much that you came for us, that you've come, that you're here today for us. God, search us and know us. Test us, search our thoughts. Father, as we said earlier, we want to take the garments off. We want to take the jackets off. We lay it down for you, Father. Show us and reveal to us what has become intertwined in our foundation of faith other than you. Help us break expectations that are not what you promised. Jesus, come and have your way. Amen. knowingly or unknowingly that it's starting to interweave in our foundation of faith, God. Other than you, we lay it down. We lay it down and we worship you, God. We trust that your ways are higher than ours and your thoughts are higher than ours. We lay it down, God. Jesus, I pray this week as we lay everything down with you, God, that we would really meet you there. We'd meet you and we'd draw close to you, God, this week as we reflect on the incredible, incredible story of love of Easter. Jesus, I pray that you would remove any shame. I pray you'd remove any disappointment, broken expectations. And as we trust you, we would feel your peace and we would see your peace, God. Jesus, come and have your way. Come and have your way. Amen. Guys, I pray for you all this week with Easter that you'd really be able to engage with it. Really encourage you to come on Friday night, even if you've never been to one of these before. It's a great way just to prepare our hearts, engage with the story together corporately, and then to celebrate on Sunday. You're so, so welcome. Yes, it's early, 6:30, but I've never regretted an early dawn service. And there'll be breakfast, I promise, at ours after. Bless you. Have a really great week. If there's stuff that's going on, physically, emotionally, spiritually, anything at all that you want prayer for, please just hang on, and we'd love to pray with you. If you've got kids, please collect your kids. Amen.
Thank you for joining us at Foyle Vineyard Church. We love walking out this adventure of being a family together on mission. If you've joined us for the first time today, we'd love to connect with you further. Head over to our website www.foylevineyard.co.uk and click I'm New to keep up to date with all the ways in which you can get involved with this busy family. Have a wonderful week and God bless.